He thought crushing her would feel sweet, but the moment she walked in with two tiny faces just like his, the air left his lungs. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Jessica Reynolds sighed as she gazed at Manhattan through the window of her small Brooklyn apartment. At 26, the Texas girl had secured a coveted position at Monarch Financial, one of Wall Street's leading brokerage firms. Her story of perseverance was remarkable. Coming from a humble family in San Antonio, she'd earned a full scholarship to NYU, where she met Marcus Blackwood, heir to one of New York's most prestigious families. The morning light caught the diamond on her left hand, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the ceiling. The engagement ring had cost more than her father's car, a fact Marcus had mentioned casually when he proposed, as if the price tag was as important as the promise it represented. Jessica's eyes shifted from the glittering skyline to the plastic stick on the bathroom counter. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. Pregnant. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope. This wasn't part of their 5-year plan. They had agreed to focus on their careers before even considering a family. Marcus was the youngest vice president in Goldman Sachs' history, with his ruthless intelligence and family connections propelling him through the ranks. Meanwhile, Jessica had worked twice as hard to prove herself as more than just a scholarship girl from Texas. Her hands trembled as she made herbal tea, arranging and rearranging the cushions on their sofa. She practiced the words in her head, trying different approaches, different tones. Should she be excited? Cautious? Matter of fact? Marcus had been at the office for 14 hours already. Another grueling day of deals and power plays. She glanced at the clock, nearly 9 in the evening. Her phone buzzed with his message. On my way. Exhausted. Order something. She didn't order food. Her stomach was too knotted with anxiety to consider eating. When the key turned in the lock, Jessica stood, hands clasped to stop their shaking. Marcus entered, 6'2" of tailored perfection, his Armani tie already loosened around his neck. His dark hair was tousled, the only sign that his day had been anything but effortless. "Hi," she said, voice smaller than intended. He barely glanced at her, heading straight for the bar cart. The Henderson merger is falling apart. 14 hours of damage control. He poured himself 2 fingers of 12-year-old Macallan. "What's for dinner?" "I'm pregnant," Jessica blurted out. The crystal tumbler paused halfway to his lips. The silence that followed was sharper than the January wind howling outside their windows. "You're what?" he finally asked. "Pregnant," she repeated, pulling the test from her pocket. "I took 3 tests, all positive." Marcus downed his whiskey in one swallow, then immediately poured another. "Are you sure? Because this would be..." He searched for the word, catastrophic. "Catastrophic?" Jessica repeated, the word hitting her like a physical blow. "It's our child, Marcus." He paced the apartment like a caged animal, his movements growing more agitated with each turn. "My father just offered me the directorship of the Asian division. 2 years in Singapore to prove myself." His voice rose. "I'm 1 step away from everything I've ever dreamed of, Jessica. And you show up with this?" He jabbed a finger toward the pregnancy test she still clutched. "A child would be a burden to my career." "I thought we had a future together," she whispered. "That I was part of your plans." "Plans?" Marcus laughed, a cruel sound Jessica would never forget. "You'll never be enough for the world I intend to conquer, just a provincial obstacle from Texas I had the misfortune of meeting at NYU." He continued, each word more vicious than the last. "What did you really think? That my family would accept a girl with no pedigree, no connections, no refinement? The novelty of dating someone so authentic," he spat the word like an insult, "has worn off." Jessica felt the floor tilt beneath her. "But I'm carrying your child." "And you don't even fit in at the charity galas now," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Imagine how much worse it would be with a crying baby on your hip." "The baby won't be at Gallus," she said, trying to inject logic into his cruelty. "You don't get it, do you?" Marcus stalked toward her, stopping inches from her face. "You're not worth the sacrifice." Jessica felt her knees buckle, sinking onto the sofa. "What are you saying?" In a theatrical gesture, Marcus grabbed her left hand and yanked the diamond ring from her finger. "I'm saying our engagement is over." He strode to the window and flung the ring out into the night, 3 carats of clarity and color disappearing into the darkness. "Marcus!" Jessica cried, rushing to the window, watching as the tiny sparkle vanished among the city lights below. "I've already arranged your resignation letter at Monarch," he said, his voice suddenly businesslike. "Conflict of interest, you understand. The partners wouldn't appreciate my ex-fiancé having access to sensitive client information." "You can't do that," Jessica whispered. "I earned that position." "The apartment is in my name," he continued, ignoring her protest. "You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live." Jessica fell to her knees, stunned. "I'm expecting your child, Marcus." "Correction. You're expecting a child. Mine, yours, it hardly matters." He grabbed his coat from the rack. "If you decide to have this baby, you'll be doing it alone." "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Back to the office. I have actual problems to solve." He opened the door. "I'll stay at the company apartment until you're gone." The door slammed with a terrible finality, leaving Jessica alone with the echo of his words and the flutter of new life inside her. 3 weeks later, Jessica huddled on a narrow bed in a women's shelter, her few possessions stuffed into a single suitcase. She had spent her first 3 nights after leaving the apartment in a youth hostel until her meager savings, just $237 after the first month's rent deposit was returned, forced her to seek free accommodation. She had tried calling Marcus repeatedly during the first week. His number was disconnected. She went to his office, only to be stopped by security who had her photo on a "Do Not Admit" list. When she attempted to report to work at Monarch Financial, her keycard was deactivated. Human Resources informed her that her resignation had been processed, effective immediately. "But I didn't resign," Jessica insisted to the HR director, a woman who had always been friendly before. "We have your resignation letter," the woman said, sliding a document across the desk, citing personal reasons. Jessica stared at her forged signature, perfectly replicated. I didn't." "Jessica," the HR director lowered her voice, "I shouldn't tell you this, but there are performance reviews in your file from the past 3 months documenting emotional instability and erratic behavior. If you contest the resignation, these will become part of the official record." Marcus had been planning this for months. "Twins," the technician said, moving the ultrasound wand over Jessica's slightly rounded belly. "See these 2 separate gestational sacs? 2 heartbeats." Jessica lay alone in the clinic's examination room, staring at the grainy black and white image. 2 tiny beans with flickering lights at their centers. 2 hearts. 2 lives dependent entirely on her. Tears streamed down her temples, soaking into her hair. "Are you okay, Ms. Reynolds?" the technician asked, concerned. "Yes," Jessica said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "Yes, I am." During the next 6 months, Jessica established a punishing routine. She woke at 5 each morning to work as a receptionist at a medical office from 7 to 2. From 3 to 8, she waited tables at a diner in the Bronx, where the manager let her sit between customers to rest her swollen ankles. From 9 until midnight, she did remote data entry work from the tiny room she'd managed to rent, sleeping 4 hours before starting again. Her body ached constantly as it stretched to accommodate 2 growing babies. Dark circles framed her eyes. Her once stylish wardrobe had been replaced by thrift store maternity clothes, purchased with tip money saved penny by penny. She had tried applying for positions at financial firms, leveraging her experience and NYU degree. Each interview ended abruptly when she mentioned her pregnancy or when her Monarch employment history was discovered. "You seem qualified, Ms. Reynolds," one interviewer told her frankly, But we've received concerning feedback from your previous employer." "What feedback?" Jessica asked, knowing the answer. "It's confidential," he replied, closing her file. "We'll keep your resume on file." They never called back. None of them did. One particularly difficult evening, after being rejected from yet another interview, Jessica found a business magazine forgotten at the communal laundromat. On the cover, Marcus smiled alongside his father, announcing Goldman Sachs's expansion into Asia, with the young Blackwood leading the operation. "The future of global finance," proclaimed the headline. Jessica sat on the floor beside the rumbling washing machine, methodically tearing the magazine page by page. Her fingers stopped at Marcus's smirking face, so confident, so untouchable. "You will not break me," she whispered to the glossy image. "You will not win." As she continued shredding the magazine, an idea began forming. Wall Street didn't want her? Perhaps Wall Street needed to be reinvented. She had worked on developing a risk assessment algorithm at Monarch, something the company had dismissed as too radical. "Maybe it's time to be radical," she murmured to herself, caressing her swollen belly. "I promise you both. One day, Marcus Blackwood will regret every word he said. One day he'll look at you and realize everything he threw away. And when that day comes, the three of us will be so far above him we'll barely be able to see him." Jessica couldn't know that 15 years later, she would be commanding a billion-dollar company while Marcus Blackwood would be begging for a second chance, not with her, but with the children he had rejected before they were even born. Jessica's promise to her unborn children echoed in the empty laundromat as she gathered the torn magazine pages. The image of Marcus's smug face stared up at her from the fragments, a reminder of everything she had lost and everything she was determined to gain back. The wind howled mercilessly as Jessica stepped outside, clutching her thin jacket around her swollen belly. February in New York showed no mercy, especially to a pregnant woman with nowhere to truly call home. She trudged through slush-covered sidewalks back to her room in the Bronx, each step a testament to her dwindling strength. 3 days later, Jessica sat across from a stern-faced woman at an employment agency, her resume, carefully edited to downplay her Monarch experience, sitting between them. "Your qualifications are impressive, Ms. Reynolds," the woman said, not looking up from the paper. "But I have to be honest." Her eyes finally lifted, settling uncomfortably on Jessica's protruding stomach. "Most of our clients aren't looking to hire someone in your condition." "My condition is temporary," Jessica replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My skills are permanent." The woman's smile was practiced, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. "We'll keep your information on file. If something suitable comes up after your situation resolves, we'll be in touch." Jessica knew there would be no call. This was the 4th agency this week. Outside, she checked her bank account balance on her phone, $173. The shelter had a 2-week maximum stay policy, which meant she had 4 days left to find housing. That evening, Jessica knocked on countless doors throughout the Bronx, responding to "room for rent" signs. The story was always the same. "You're pregnant?" a landlord asked, peering suspiciously at her midsection. "Any income?" "I work 3 jobs," Jessica replied. "I can pay first month's rent now. And when the babies come, you got family to help? I'll manage." The door closed in her face. No one wanted a tenant who might soon have crying infants. No one wanted the complications. On her 7th attempt, Jessica found herself in front of a dilapidated building with peeling paint and a broken front step. "$200 a week," said the elderly woman who answered, her face a map of deep wrinkles. "Bathroom shared with 2 others. No overnight guests, no pets, no noise after 10. The room was barely larger than a closet. The walls were stained with water damage, the ceiling was cracked, and the single window was partially covered with cardboard where the glass had broken. A narrow bed took up most of the space, with just enough room for a small dresser. "I'll take it," Jessica said without hesitation. That night, lying on the lumpy mattress, Jessica could hear every sound from the surrounding rooms: arguments, television, coughing. She placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the twins moving inside her. "We'll find something better soon," she whispered. "I promise." The following week, Jessica walked into a small law firm specializing in employment cases. The lawyer, a tired-looking man in his 50s, listened to her story with increasing discomfort. "So you're claiming wrongful termination based on pregnancy discrimination?" he asked when she finished. "Yes," Jessica replied. "Marcus arranged my dismissal when he found out I was pregnant. I never submitted a resignation letter." The lawyer sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Ms. Reynolds, the Blackwood family has connections throughout this city, including the legal community. Their influence extends into every major law firm, every courthouse." "But what they did was illegal," Jessica insisted. "I have rights." "On paper, yes." He slid her documents back across the desk. "But they've created a paper trail of poor performance reviews. They have your signature, forged or not, on a resignation letter. And frankly, no attorney with any hope of a future in New York will take on the Blackwoods." Jessica felt her last hope disintegrating. "So there's nothing I can do?" "My advice? Focus on rebuilding your life elsewhere. The financial sector in New York is essentially closed to you now." This was the fourth attorney who had refused her case. By her 6th month of pregnancy, Jessica had established a grueling routine. Her alarm blared at 5 each morning in the tiny Bronx room. By 6:30, she was at Dr. Friedman's medical office in Washington Heights, answering phones and filing charts until 2 in the afternoon. "Jessica, you look exhausted," Dr. Friedman said one day, finding her dozing at the reception desk during lunch. "Your blood pressure concerns me." "I'm fine," she insisted, straightening up. "Just resting my eyes." "Twins are high risk even under ideal circumstances," he warned. "You're working too hard." But there was no alternative. By 3, Jessica had changed into a waitress uniform at Dino's Diner 10 blocks away, serving plates of greasy food to customers who rarely tipped more than spare change. "Take your break, honey," Marge, the 60-year-old head waitress, would say when she noticed Jessica wincing from back pain. "Put those feet up before they explode." The 15-minute breaks were barely enough to ease the throbbing in her swollen ankles before she was back on her feet for another 5 hours. At 9, Jessica would drag herself back to her room, power up her second-hand laptop, and begin her third job, entering data for a market research company that didn't know or care about her circumstances, only that the work was done by morning. 4 hours of sleep was all she allowed herself. 4 precious hours to recover before starting again. During a rare free hour between jobs, Jessica sat in a clinic waiting room for her monthly ultrasound. The other expectant mothers chatted excitedly about nursery colors and baby showers. Jessica kept her eyes fixed on her worn shoes, calculating how many more shifts she would need to afford a second-hand crib. "Your stress levels are dangerously elevated," the obstetrician told her after examining the results. "The babies are measuring slightly small for their gestational age." Jessica felt a stab of guilt. "What should I do?" "Rest more. Reduce your workload. Eat better. Stress this severe affects fetal development and increases risk of premature birth." Jessica nodded as if these were reasonable requests, knowing they were impossible luxuries. That night she skipped dinner to save the $7, using the time instead to search online for any financial firms willing to interview her. Each application felt like shouting into a void. One company finally granted her an interview. Jessica spent her last $20 on a maternity dress from a thrift store, hoping it looked professional enough. The interviewer, a woman in her 40s, seemed impressed by Jessica's credentials until the inevitable question arose. "There's a gap in your employment. You left Monarch Financial. Why?" Jessica had prepared for this. "I wanted to explore opportunities better aligned with my career goals." "Interesting," the woman said, clearly not believing her. "And your pregnancy? When are you due?" In about 3 months. But I plan to take minimal time off. The woman's smile tightened. We need someone who can fully commit to the role. The investment banking sector isn't particularly accommodating to new mothers. Another rejection. Another door closed. One evening, bone-tired after her waitressing shift, Jessica stopped at the laundromat to wash her uniforms. The communal television was tuned to a financial news program. She froze when Marcus's face appeared on screen. Marcus Blackwood, newly appointed Director of Asian Operations for Goldman Sachs, joins us to discuss emerging markets, the host announced. Jessica couldn't tear her eyes away. Marcus looked immaculate in a custom suit, speaking confidently about investment strategies and global expansion. He was thriving, ascending, while she was barely surviving. A discarded magazine on the folding table caught her eye. She picked it up, finding Marcus again, this time on the cover with his father. "The future of global finance," the headline declared. "The future," Jessica murmured bitterly, sinking onto a plastic chair. She began tearing the magazine methodically, page by page, a therapeutic destruction. As she ripped through an article about disruption in financial technologies, a dormant idea reawakened. At Monarch, she had developed an algorithm for risk assessment that the company dismissed as too revolutionary. "Traditional methods have served us well," her supervisor had said. "No need to reinvent the wheel." But what if the wheel needed reinventing? Jessica retrieved her laptop from her bag, opening files she hadn't touched in months. The algorithm was there, unfinished, unrefined, but built on a vision of financial access that traditional institutions ignored. "Maybe it's time to be radical," she whispered, fingers hovering over the keyboard. For the first time in months, excitement flickered through her exhaustion. Wall Street had rejected her, but perhaps that wasn't the end of her story. Perhaps it was just the beginning of a different one. 2 weeks later, Jessica sat in a cramped examination room, staring at the ultrasound monitor. "Both babies are developing well, though still slightly underweight," the technician said. "Would you like to know the sexes?" Jessica nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "A boy and a girl. Congratulations." A son and a daughter. Reality crashed over her. In less than 3 months, she would be responsible for 2 tiny lives. 2 babies who would need food, clothing, healthcare, love. 2 babies whose father had discarded them as inconvenient obstacles to his ambition. That night, Jessica worked on her algorithm until dawn, fueled by a determination that transcended her physical exhaustion. She would build something that would not only support her children, but would show Marcus, show the entire financial world exactly what they had dismissed. The $50 she spent on specialized programming texts was money she couldn't afford, but an investment she couldn't not make. Between shifts, during breaks, in the midnight hours, Jessica refined her vision. A system that would democratize financial access, using blockchain technology to create transparency where traditional banks maintained deliberate opacity. As her pregnancy advanced and her body strained under the triple burden of impending motherhood, poverty, and exhaustion, her mind remained sharp, focused on the future she was designing, not just for herself, but for the twins who would enter the world with nothing but her determination as their inheritance. While Marcus celebrated his ascension in the corporate world, he couldn't imagine that the algorithm Jessica was designing in her miserable Bronx room would be the seed of an empire that would one day make his own company seem obsolete. The algorithm on Jessica's screen blurred as she rubbed her eyes, the numbers swimming together after 6 straight hours of coding. Dawn was breaking over the Bronx, pale light filtering through the cardboard-patched window of her tiny room. Her back ached fiercely from sitting on the threadbare mattress, laptop balanced precariously on her knees to accommodate her heavily pregnant belly. "Just a little longer," she whispered to the twins, who seemed particularly active tonight, as if sharing her excitement over the breakthrough in her code. She had finally mapped the foundation of a microfinance system that could bypass traditional banking gatekeepers, a digital infrastructure that could offer loans to those the established institutions deemed high risk. A sharp pain lanced through her lower abdomen, making her gasp. False contractions had been coming more frequently this week. Braxton Hicks, the doctor called them. But this felt different. When the second contraction hit 3 minutes later, Jessica knew. She was only 34 weeks along, too early. Fear gripped her as she called a cab she couldn't afford to the nearest hospital. "First baby?" the driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "Twins," Jessica managed through gritted teeth, clutching her small overnight bag, packed weeks ago in anxious preparation. "Father meeting you there?" Jessica turned to the window, watching the city blur past. No father. At the hospital, everything accelerated. The contractions intensified, her water broke in the examination room, and a team of medical professionals materialized around her. 34 weeks with twins, premature labor. "BP 140/90. Too high," a doctor called out. "Is someone coming to be with you?" a nurse asked kindly, helping Jessica change into a hospital gown. "No, I'm alone," Jessica said, fighting tears as another contraction tore through her. The nurse, Sophia according to her name tag, squeezed Jessica's hand. "Not anymore. I'm staying right here." For the next 11 hours, Sophia remained by Jessica's side, offering encouragement and wiping sweat from her brow as Jessica brought her children into the world through sheer determination and grit. "It's a boy," the doctor announced as the first tiny cry pierced the delivery room. Minutes later, "And here's his sister." They were whisked away immediately to the NICU, too small, too early to remain with their mother. "Are they okay?" Jessica asked desperately, trying to lift herself from the bed. "They need help breathing," Sophia explained gently, "but they're fighters, just like their mom." 2 days later, Jessica stood outside the NICU glass, staring at her children nestled in incubators, tubes, and wires connecting their tiny bodies to machines. Alexander weighed 4 pounds 3 ounces. Emma, smaller still at 3 pounds 11 ounces. Their translucent skin revealed blue veins beneath, their eyes still fused shut, their little chests rising and falling with assisted breaths. "They're doing remarkably well for 34 weekers," the neonatologist assured her. "But they'll need to stay here until they reach term, about 6 more weeks." Jessica nodded, pressing her palm against the glass, the closest she could get to touching them. The reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She had no health insurance beyond the basic emergency coverage provided by the state. No paid maternity leave from her 3 minimum-wage jobs. No partner to share the emotional or financial burden. When the hospital administrator appeared beside her with a clipboard, Jessica knew what was coming. "Ms. Reynolds, we need to discuss financial arrangements for the extended NICU stay. Without comprehensive insurance, the costs are—" The woman paused, as if the number was too terrible to speak aloud. "Significant." Jessica took the paperwork, her eyes widening at the figures. The deposit alone was more than she would earn in 6 months. "This will go to collections," the administrator explained without emotion. "You can apply for assistance, but with your income you'll still be responsible for most of it." Jessica signed the papers, knowing she was committing to a debt she might never repay. But what choice did she have? Her children needed to live. For 2 weeks, Jessica divided her time between the hospital and her data entry job, the only one flexible enough to keep. She'd been forced to give up the receptionist and waitressing positions. There simply weren't enough hours in the day, and her body was still recovering from childbirth. She slept in uncomfortable hospital chairs, showered in the public bathroom when no one was looking, and survived on vending machine snacks and cafeteria leftovers that kind nurses would save for her. Each day she sat beside the incubators, speaking softly to Alex and Emma, telling them about the world waiting for them, the future she would build. Their conditions improved steadily, breathing on their own, gaining precious ounces, their features becoming more defined. Jessica was allowed to hold them occasionally, practicing kangaroo care with each tiny body against her bare chest, marveling at the perfect miniature fingers, the wispy hair, the determined frowns that reminded her unmistakably of herself. When they were finally discharged, still small but healthy enough for home care, Jessica faced her next challenge. Her room in the Bronx was barely adequate for one person, let alone a mother with newborn twins. With her savings depleted and credit cards maxed out from hospital cafeteria meals and cab fares, she had few options. The first night home was a nightmare. The twins cried in shifts, ensuring Jessica got no sleep at all. She tried to feed them while answering urgent emails from her data entry supervisor, who was concerned about her declining output. By morning, Jessica was in tears, Alexander wailing in her arms while Emma fussed in the second-hand bassinet that barely fit alongside her bed. "I can't do this," she whispered, the admission feeling like defeat. "I can't do this alone." A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Sophia, the nurse from the delivery room, standing in the hallway. "I hope you don't mind," Sophia said, taking in the chaos of the tiny room with a sympathetic glance. "I kept your address from your intake forms. I was worried." Jessica burst into fresh tears, unable to maintain her composure in the face of unexpected kindness. "Oh, honey," Sophia said, stepping inside and taking Alexander from Jessica's trembling arms. "You're exhausted. When did you last sleep? Or eat something that wasn't from a vending machine?" "I don't remember," Jessica admitted. Sophia settled Alexander against her shoulder with practiced ease. "I've got the day off. Let me help." That afternoon, while the twins napped, Sophia made tea and listened as Jessica explained her situation. Her background in finance, the algorithm she was developing, her dreams of creating a system that could help people like herself. "I just need time," Jessica said, glancing at her laptop, untouched for days. "Time to finish the code, time to present it to potential investors. But there aren't enough hours, and I can't afford childcare, and I'm so tired I can barely think straight." Sophia considered her for a long moment. "I have Tuesdays and Wednesdays off. I could help with the babies those days while you work on your project." Jessica stared at her in disbelief. "I couldn't ask you to—" "You didn't ask. I offered," Sophia interrupted. "Besides, my own kids are in college now. I miss having little ones around." This spontaneous gesture of support became the first thread in what Jessica would later call her chosen family, the network of allies who helped her survive those early years. With Sophia's help 2 days a week, Jessica could focus on completing her algorithm. When her electricity was cut off for non-payment, she worked by candlelight, the twins sleeping nearby, bundled against the chill of a building with unreliable heat. 3 months after the twins' birth, Jessica discovered a startup competition for financial technology innovations with a $50,000 prize. She spent weeks perfecting her presentation, rehearsing her pitch while rocking fussy babies, coding during their brief naps. The night before the competition, the babysitter, a teenager from downstairs who occasionally watched the twins for a few dollars, called to cancel. Desperate, Jessica packed the baby's diaper bag with everything they might need for the day. At the competition venue, she drew curious and judgmental looks as she set up her presentation with Emma strapped to her chest and Alexander in a second-hand stroller. "You're presenting with them?" asked an organizer, eyeing the babies dubiously. "Yes," Jessica replied simply, adjusting Emma, who felt warm against her chest. When her turn came, Jessica took the stage, her professional confidence at odds with her appearance. Dark circles under her eyes, clothes that hung loosely on her still-recovering body, a fussy baby against her chest. "My name is Jessica Reynolds, and I'm here to show you how we can democratize access to financial services through blockchain technology." She launched into her presentation, explaining complex algorithms while gently bouncing Emma, who had developed a fever that morning. Despite the distraction, Jessica's brilliance shone through as she outlined a system that could evaluate creditworthiness using non-traditional metrics, opening doors for those systematically excluded by conventional banking. Halfway through, the room began to blur. Jessica had been surviving on 2 hours of sleep per night for months, subsisting on whatever food was cheapest. Her body, still recovering from a difficult twin pregnancy, simply gave out. Her knees buckled, and darkness closed in from the edges of her vision. She awakened to bright lights and concerned faces. Someone had taken the twins. Panic surged through her until she saw a kind-faced man holding both babies nearby, speaking softly to them. "Ms. Reynolds?" A doctor leaned into her field of vision. "You're severely dehydrated and exhausted. When did you last eat a proper meal?" Jessica couldn't remember. The man with her babies approached the bed. "Your children are fine," he said in an accented voice. "Your presentation, what I saw of it before you collapsed, was extraordinary." "Who are you?" Jessica asked weakly. "Rajiv Mehta. I was a judge at the competition." He smiled, gently rocking Alexander. "Your algorithm for microfinance is brilliant, truly revolutionary." "Thank you," Jessica murmured, embarrassed by her weakness, by the circumstances of their meeting. "The competition has rules. You couldn't finish your presentation, so you can't win the prize," Rajiv said. "But I'm not bound by those rules in my personal capacity." Jessica looked at him confused. "I would like to invest in your company, Ms. Reynolds. $50,000 to start." "My company?" Jessica repeated, wondering if she was hallucinating from exhaustion. "The one you're going to build around this algorithm," Rajiv clarified. "What would you call it?" Jessica thought of the past year, losing everything, hitting rock bottom, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding. One image came to mind, a mythical bird, rising from ashes. "Phoenix," she said softly. "Phoenix Digital." Rajiv nodded approvingly. "Perfect. And if you can create a revolutionary algorithm while caring for 2 babies, I can only imagine what you'll accomplish with proper resources." The $50,000 that Rajiv invested that afternoon would be the first brick of an empire valued in billions, while the twins that Marcus rejected would become the most coveted young prodigies on Wall Street. The morning light filtered through the windows of Jessica's small apartment in Bushwick, catching on the dust particles that danced in the air. 3 years had passed since Rajiv's investment had given Phoenix Digital its first breath of life. The $50,000 had been carefully allocated, first for a small but secure apartment, then for basic office equipment, and finally for the cloud computing resources needed to refine her algorithm. Jessica stood by the window, watching the twins play in their designated corner of the living room. At 3 years old, Alex and Emma were already showing signs of extraordinary intelligence. Alex, his dark hair falling over serious eyes, methodically arranged alphabet blocks in complex patterns, while Emma had dismantled a toy clock, tiny screwdriver clutched in her determined fingers. "Look, Mama," Emma called, holding up a gear. "This makes the hands move." "That's incredible, sweetie," Jessica replied, marveling at her daughter's natural curiosity about mechanics. Last week, Emma had figured out how to unlock Jessica's tablet, navigating to educational games without being shown. A notification chimed on Jessica's laptop. Another rejection from a venture capital firm. "While your concept is intriguing, we question whether a solo founder with your personal responsibilities can successfully scale this business." The subtext was clear. A single mother with twins wasn't a sound investment, regardless of her innovation's potential. Jessica had heard variations of this sentiment in dozens of pitch meetings over the past year. Her phone rang, Rajiv, calling from his office downtown. "How did the Sanderson meeting go?" he asked without preamble. "Same as the others," Jessica sighed. "They love the technology but doubt I can execute while raising children." "Their loss," Rajiv replied firmly. "The prototype is ready for real-world testing. We don't need their money to move forward." Jessica smiled at his use of "we." Though he maintained only a small advisory stake in Phoenix Digital after she'd repurchased most of his shares, Rajiv had become much more than an investor. He was a mentor, a strategic advisor, and to the twins, Uncle Raj, who arrived bearing educational toys and stories about his childhood in Mumbai. As if summoned by her thoughts, a knock at the door heralded his arrival. The twins abandoned their activities, racing to greet him. "My favorite geniuses!" Rajiv exclaimed, kneeling to embrace them. He presented 2 carefully wrapped packages. "Building blocks that teach coding concepts," he explained to Jessica. "My nephews in India loved them." "Your nephews in India are 14, Jessica noted with amusement. "And these 2 are smarter already," Rajiv replied without a hint of exaggeration. He watched as the twins immediately began exploring the new toys with methodical curiosity. "Have you decided about the office space?" Jessica nodded, leading him to the kitchen table that doubled as her workspace. "I'm taking the desk at the Williamsburg co-working spot. It's not ideal, but it's affordable and has reliable internet." "And the twins?" "That's the complicated part," Jessica admitted. "Childcare costs more than the office space. I've been taking them with me when possible, but it's not sustainable." As if on cue, Emma began crying. Alex had claimed both coding toys. Jessica moved to intervene, but Rajiv waved her off, handling the situation with gentle diplomacy that resulted in shared resources and restored harmony. "You need help," Rajiv stated simply when he rejoined her. "Not just occasional babysitting, but consistent support." "I can't afford a nanny," Jessica reminded him, "and daycare for twins would consume most of our runway." A knock interrupted their conversation. Jessica opened the door to find Mrs. Martinez, her elderly neighbor, holding a container of homemade soup. "I heard the little ones earlier," the woman said, glancing past Jessica to where the twins were playing. "My daughter brought me too much food again. I thought you might enjoy some." Jessica accepted the container gratefully. Mrs. Martinez had been bringing food regularly since they moved in, always under the pretext of having too much. Jessica suspected the woman simply understood how difficult it was to cook proper meals while juggling entrepreneurship and parenthood. "They're getting so big," Mrs. Martinez observed, watching the twins. "My grandchildren are in California now. I only see them twice a year. The house is too quiet." After she left, Rajiv looked thoughtful. "Mrs. Martinez lives alone?" "Yes. Her husband passed away 5 years ago. Her children moved away for work." "And she clearly adores children," Rajiv mused. "Perhaps there's a mutually beneficial arrangement to be made." The next day, Jessica approached Mrs. Martinez with a proposition. Would she consider watching the twins during business hours a few days a week? The pay would be modest, but reliable. "Pay?" Mrs. Martinez waved her hand dismissively. "Having those angels keep me company is payment enough, but yes, I'll accept a small amount to make it proper." This arrangement became the first piece of Jessica's carefully constructed support system, her chosen family forming around her and the twins, enabling her to focus on building Phoenix Digital's first commercial product. The co-working space in Williamsburg became Jessica's office 5 days a week. On the rare occasions when Mrs. Martinez wasn't available, Jessica brought the twins with her, setting them up with books and educational toys in a corner of her small desk space. More than once, she nursed Emma discreetly while coding, earning both judgmental glances and admiring looks from fellow entrepreneurs. "Who watches your children while you work?" a potential investor asked during one particularly frustrating meeting. "This business model would require your full attention. That seems unsustainable with your situation." Jessica's patience, worn thin from similar comments, finally snapped. "The same invisible support system that cares for the children of male CEOs while they sit in rooms like this," she replied coolly. "My personal arrangements don't impact my professional capabilities, just as I assume your family obligations don't impact yours." The investor had the grace to look embarrassed, but the funding still didn't materialize. Despite the setbacks, Phoenix Digital's first product, a microfinance platform using blockchain technology, took shape. After 18 months of development, it was ready for implementation. Now Jessica needed her first real client. She targeted community credit unions, institutions already committed to serving underbanked populations, but lacking the technology to do so efficiently. After dozens of rejections, she secured a meeting with Harlem Community Credit Union, a small but respected institution with a 50-year history of serving local residents. "Our current system rejects 60% of loan applicants based on traditional credit metrics," explained Vernon Williams, the credit union's CEO, during their meeting. "But we know many of those people are reliable, hard-working folks who just haven't had opportunities to build conventional credit histories." Jessica nodded, understanding completely. That's exactly the problem Phoenix Digital solves. Our system evaluates creditworthiness using alternative data points, consistent bill payments, steady employment, even community involvement, allowing you to safely serve people that big banks reject. She demonstrated the platform, showing how it could identify promising borrowers among those traditionally overlooked. Vernon asked sharp questions, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to interest. "Implementation costs?" he asked finally. Jessica named a figure that was fair but also sustainable for her fledgling company, "and will provide ongoing support and updates for a modest monthly fee." Vernon studied her for a long moment. "You believe in this, don't you? It's not just business for you." 3 years ago, I was pregnant, unemployed, and had exactly $237 to my name," Jessica replied honestly. "Every financial institution saw me as a risk, not as a person with potential. I built this system because I've lived on the wrong side of those risk assessments." 2 days later, Vernon called to accept her proposal. Jessica's hands trembled as she signed her first real client contract, fighting to maintain professional composure until she was alone in the elevator. Only then did she allow herself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, jumping and punching the air in celebration. The implementation was a success. Within 6 months, Harlem Community Credit Union reported a 30% increase in loan approvals with no increase in defaults. Jessica used this case study to approach other credit unions, slowly building a client base of community-focused financial institutions. A local business newspaper ran a small feature, "Mother's FinTech Innovation Expands Credit Access." The article highlighted Jessica's personal story of rebuilding after hardship, including a photo of her with the twins. The morning after publication, Rajiv called. "Have you seen the responses to the article? It's generating significant interest." Jessica had seen them, along with emails from 3 potential investors who had previously declined meetings. "It's a double-edged sword," she observed. "Using my personal story attracts attention, but I'm not sure I want to be known primarily as the abandoned mother who coded." "It's a valid concern," Rajiv acknowledged. "Do you want to be the mother founder or the fintech innovator? The market may try to define you by your circumstances rather than your technology." That evening, Jessica sat cross-legged on the living room floor, teaching the twins basic algorithm concepts using colored blocks. Emma grasped the patterns immediately, while Alex methodically tested different combinations, his approach more analytical but equally effective. "Mama, we made it work!" Emma exclaimed as they successfully arranged the blocks to solve the puzzle Jessica had set. "You certainly did," Jessica replied, amazed at their natural aptitude. At just 3 years old, they understood concepts that many adults struggled with. Later, after tucking the twins into bed, Jessica checked her bank account. For the first time since Phoenix Digital's inception, she could afford to pay herself a modest salary. Not enough for luxury, but enough to buy ice cream as a special treat for the 3 of them tomorrow, a small celebration of this milestone. Standing by the window of their Bushwick apartment, Jessica gazed toward the Manhattan skyline glittering in the distance. 3 years ago, she'd been forced out of that world. Now she was building her own path back, not as someone's fiancé or employee, but as a founder and innovator. "One day we'll return," she whispered to the sleeping twins, "but on our own terms." As she prepared for bed, Jessica couldn't know that in just 7 years she would be commanding a unicorn company, nor that the Harlem Community Credit Union would be just the first of hundreds of financial institutions revolutionized by her technology. The Phoenix Digital logo gleamed on the wall as the champagne flowed freely among the small but dedicated team. 5 years had passed since the company's founding, and the growth had been nothing short of extraordinary. Jessica, now 31, stood in the center of their new Manhattan office, watching as Rajiv ceremoniously handed her an oversized check. With this transaction, Rajiv announced to the assembled staff, "I am officially returning to my rightful position as merely the wise advisor and handsome uncle to 2 brilliant children." The team laughed as Jessica accepted the check representing her repurchase of Rajiv's ownership stake, with a 1,200% return on his initial investment. "I wouldn't call this merely anything," Jessica replied, embracing him warmly. "Phoenix wouldn't exist without you." "Nonsense," Rajiv whispered. "You would have found another way. You always do." As the celebration continued, Jessica slipped away to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline from a perspective she hadn't enjoyed in years. The view from their new office, modest by New York standards but impossibly luxurious compared to her Bushwick apartment, represented more than just commercial success. It was a return, a reclamation of space that had once rejected her. The Phoenix Digital sign was being installed on the building directory in the lobby. 5 years of relentless work, of sleepless nights and strategic gambles had transformed her algorithm from concept to reality. Now, 37 credit unions and community banks across the country used their platform, with a waiting list growing monthly. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Martinez. "The twins are working on a school project. They have questions about their father for a family tree assignment." The message landed like a stone in Jessica's stomach. The twins were 8 now, curious, perceptive, and increasingly aware of the gap in their family narrative. She had always known this day would come, had prepared for it, but the reality still squeezed her heart. "I need to leave early," she told her team. "Family matter." Back in their Chelsea apartment, purchased 6 months earlier with Phoenix's first significant profits, Jessica found the twins at the dining table surrounded by construction paper, photos, and glue sticks. Their school project, a family tree, was nearly complete on one side. Her parents in San Antonio, grandparents, even her cousin in Austin were represented by small photos and carefully printed names. The other side of the tree was conspicuously empty. "Mama," Emma began, her expression serious, "Ms. Gonzalez says we need to complete both sides of our family tree." Jessica sat down between them, taking a deep breath. "What did you tell her?" "That we don't have a dad," Alex replied matter-of-factly, his dark eyes, so like his father's, watching her reaction carefully. "But she said everyone has a father, even if they don't live with them." Jessica nodded slowly. "She's right. Biologically, everyone does have a father." "So who is ours?" Emma asked, pencil poised over the blank space on the paper. "The other kids know their dads, even the ones with divorced parents." Jessica had rehearsed this conversation countless times in her mind. She had vowed never to lie to her children, but also never to burden them with her bitterness. "Come sit with me," she said, moving to the couch. The twins settled on either side of her, their small bodies warm against hers. "Your father's name is Marcus Blackwood. He and I met at NYU and were engaged to be married. When I told him I was pregnant with you both, he chose not to be part of our lives." "He didn't want us?" Alex's voice was small but steady. Jessica chose her words carefully. "He chose not to be a father. That was about him, not about you." "Didn't he love us?" Emma's question pierced Jessica's heart. "He didn't know how to love properly," Jessica replied, stroking her daughter's hair. "Some people in this world aren't ready for the responsibility of loving others more than themselves." "Is that why you never talk about him?" Alex asked. "Partly," Jessica admitted, "but mostly because he chose to leave before you were born, so he's not really part of our story." "Will we ever meet him?" Emma's eyes, curious and intelligent, searched Jessica's face. "That would be his choice to make," Jessica said carefully. "He knows where we are. He's chosen not to be involved. Are we supposed to be sad about it? Alex asked, his analytical mind seeking the appropriate emotional response. Jessica smiled gently. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. Sad, angry, curious, all those feelings are valid. But remember something important. Some people enter our lives to stay, while others only pass through to teach us something. Your father taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, and that's a valuable lesson. The twins nodded, processing this information with the remarkable maturity that continually surprised even Jessica. Together, they decided to include Marcus's name on their family tree but leave his photo blank. It was factually accurate without giving him more importance than he deserved. The next morning at Phoenix Digital, Jessica prepared for their most significant meeting yet, a presentation to First National Bank, a mid-sized financial institution with over 100 branches nationwide. Landing this client would move Phoenix from serving primarily community organizations to competing directly with established financial technology providers. They're considering proposals from several companies, Rajiv reminded her as they reviewed the presentation, including Goldman Sachs. Jessica froze. Goldman still has Marcus on staff? Senior position in domestic operations, Rajiv confirmed, though rumor has it he's not exactly the golden boy anymore. Some questionable investment strategies in emerging markets. Jessica brushed away thoughts of Marcus. His presence there is irrelevant. Our technology is superior. That's what matters. The meeting at First National's headquarters was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Jessica arrived early, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that projected confidence and competence. As she set up her presentation, she caught snippets of conversation among the bank executives. The Goldman team presented yesterday. Solid proposal, very traditional approach. Traditional isn't necessarily what we need. Our competitors are eating into our market share with more innovative solutions. When Jessica began her presentation, she could sense the skepticism from the older executives. A woman in her early 30s presenting technology that challenged decades of established banking practices. But as she demonstrated Phoenix's system, showing how it could identify promising borrowers among those traditionally overlooked while maintaining rigorous risk management, their expressions shifted from doubt to interest. Your alternative data points for creditworthiness assessment, began the bank's chief risk officer. How do they perform compared to FICO scores in predicting defaults? 23% more accurate in our existing implementations, Jessica replied confidently. I can show you the 5-year data from our first client, Harlem Community Credit Union. The questions grew more technical, more specific. Jessica answered each one with precision and clarity, drawing on 5 years of real-world results rather than theoretical projections. Impressive, admitted the CEO finally, but we're also considering proposals from established institutions. Goldman Sachs, specifically, has a century of banking experience behind their solution. With respect, Jessica countered, that century of experience has created blind spots. Traditional banking has systematically excluded viable customers based on metrics designed for a different era. Phoenix Digital was built specifically to see what those traditional systems miss. As the meeting concluded, Jessica sensed she had made an impression, but the outcome remained uncertain. We'll be making our decision by the end of the week, the CEO informed her. We're considering 3 final proposals, including yours. 3 days of tense waiting followed. Jessica threw herself into other work, trying not to obsess over the potential deal that would either catapult Phoenix to a new level or confirm that established players like Goldman Sachs still held insurmountable advantages. The call came on Friday afternoon. Jessica took it in her office, Rajiv waiting anxiously outside. Ms. Reynolds, began the First National CEO, we've completed our evaluation process. Jessica held her breath. Your technology is genuinely innovative, and your results are compelling. We'd like to move forward with Phoenix Digital as our partner in customer risk assessment. Jessica maintained professional composure throughout the remainder of the call, discussing implementation timelines and contract details with steady focus. Only after hanging up did she allow herself to celebrate, throwing open her office door. "We got it," she announced to Rajiv and the waiting team. That evening, Jessica met with a real estate agent to view a penthouse apartment in Chelsea, a far cry from the tiny Bushwick rental where she and the twins had spent their early years. The twins raced from room to room, exclaiming over the space, the views, the built-in bookshelves perfect for their growing collection. "It's competitive," the agent warned. "Multiple offers already, likely to go above asking." Jessica nodded, watching her children explore what could be their new home. "I'll make a cash offer, 10% above asking, with a flexible closing date to accommodate the sellers." The agent's eyebrows rose. "That should position you favorably." 2 weeks later, Jessica watched as the twins claimed their new bedrooms, spaces 3 times larger than what they'd had before, with custom desks for their studies and views of the Manhattan skyline. Standing in the doorway, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. 5 years ago, she had promised to provide stability for her children. Now, she was delivering on that promise in ways she could scarcely have imagined during those desperate early days. That evening, Jessica sat for an interview with a business magazine in their new home. The journalist, a woman in her 40s, seemed particularly interested in the personal angle. "How did you manage to build a successful financial technology company as a single mother of twins?" she asked, recorder running. Jessica considered the question carefully. "By understanding that systems should serve people, not the other way around. That's true in parenting, and it's true in finance. Phoenix Digital exists because traditional financial systems fail to see human potential beyond narrow metrics. Our success comes from that fundamental insight." While the journalist seemed disappointed by the lack of dramatic personal details, Jessica maintained her focus on Phoenix's mission and technology. Her story was her own, to share selectively on her terms, not to be packaged as an inspirational tragedy for public consumption. At the company's 5th anniversary celebration the following week, Jessica stood before her team of 28 employees, the twins seated proudly in the front row beside Rajiv. 5 years ago, Phoenix Digital existed only as code on a second-hand laptop and a vision of financial services that recognized human potential beyond traditional metrics, she began. Today, we've proven that vision not only works but outperforms conventional systems. None of this would be possible without each person in this room believing in that vision and bringing it to life. She raised her glass. To the next 5 years, and to proving that the most valuable asset in finance isn't currency or commodities, but human potential. The real estate agent had been impressed with Jessica's cash offer for the Chelsea apartment, but he couldn't imagine that in just 2 years, she would be purchasing a Tribeca penthouse 10 times more expensive, while Phoenix Digital became the first unicorn of financial technology founded by a woman. Jessica's champagne glass caught the evening light as she gazed at the Forbes magazine on her desk. Her own face stared back at her from the cover, alongside the bold headline, "The Phoenix of Wall Street, the woman reinventing financial systems." 7 years after founding Phoenix Digital, Jessica Reynolds had achieved what skeptics had deemed impossible, a female-founded fintech company valued at $1 billion. A unicorn. The magazine's glossy surface reflected the journey from that torn publication in a Bronx laundromat where Marcus's smug face had once mocked her desperate circumstances. Now her story occupied the same prestigious space, but with a narrative of triumph rather than inherited privilege. A knock at her office door interrupted her reflection. Rajiv entered, his expression jubilant. "The board meeting went exactly as predicted," he announced. "Final valuation, $1.2 billion. Congratulations, Jessica. You've created the first female-founded fintech unicorn in history." Jessica exhaled slowly, the magnitude of the achievement settling over her. "It doesn't feel real yet." "It's very real," Rajiv assured her, gesturing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office. Below stretched the financial district of Manhattan, The very ecosystem that had once expelled her, now forced to acknowledge her as a power player. That evening, Jessica celebrated quietly at home with the twins, ordering pizza and explaining what unicorn meant in startup terminology. At 10 years old, Alex and Emma sat at the dining table of their Tribeca penthouse, attentive and curious as always. "It means Phoenix Digital is worth more than $1 billion, Jessica explained, watching their eyes widen. "Are we billionaires now?" Alex asked, his analytical mind immediately calculating their position. "The company is valued at $1 billion, Jessica clarified. "That's different from having $1 billion in cash. But yes, technically our family assets would be valued in that range." Emma considered this, her head tilted thoughtfully. "Does this mean we're rich like the kids at Westfield Academy?" The prestigious private school they attended was filled with children of New York's elite. "We have resources," Jessica replied carefully. "That means we have responsibility. Wealth isn't about what you can buy, but what you can build and who you can help." The conversation shifted when Emma mentioned a school meeting Jessica needed to attend the following day. "Ms. Perkins says it's important, about our academic assessment." The next morning, Jessica sat in the headmistress's office at Westfield Academy, the same school that Marcus had once mentioned his children would attend someday. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Mrs. Reynolds," began Ms. Perkins, then quickly corrected herself. "Ms. Reynolds, I've asked you here because Alex and Emma's test results are extraordinary. They're performing academically at levels we typically see in high school students." Jessica nodded, unsurprised. She had witnessed their remarkable intellects developing daily. "They're not just bright," the headmistress continued. "They're exceptional, genuinely gifted. We believe they need specialized education beyond what even Westfield can provide." She slid a brochure across the desk. "The Advanced Scientific Minds program at Columbia works with exceptional children. It would allow them to pursue university-level studies while maintaining social connections with peers their age." Jessica examined the brochure, conflicting emotions rising within her. Pride in her children's abilities competed with concern about pushing them too fast, too soon. "This is their recommendation," Ms. Perkins added, producing 2 evaluations. "Alex shows remarkable aptitude for data analysis and mathematical modeling. Emma's abilities in algorithmic thinking and coding are simply unprecedented for her age." That evening, Jessica discovered exactly how unprecedented those abilities were. Entering the twins' shared study space, she found them huddled over a computer, lines of code filling the screen. "What are you working on?" she asked casually. "We're trying to improve the prediction model in your customer assessment algorithm," Alex explained without looking up. "The current version doesn't adequately account for regional economic fluctuations." Emma pointed to a section of code. "We think this conditional statement could be optimized to reduce false negatives by approximately 12%. Jessica stared at the screen, stunned not by their understanding of programming. She had been teaching them basic coding for years, but by their intuitive grasp of the complex financial principles underlying Phoenix Digital's core technology. "How long have you been working on this?" she asked, scrolling through their modifications. "About 3 weeks," Emma replied. "Is it okay? We accessed your development server. The password wasn't very strong." Instead of scolding them for the unauthorized access, Jessica pulled up a chair. "Show me what you've done." For the next hour, the twins walked her through their improvements, enhancements that Jessica's senior developers hadn't yet conceived. The algorithm they had created together was elegant, sophisticated, and potentially revolutionary. 2 weeks later, after Phoenix's development team had verified and refined the twins' work, Jessica sat in a meeting with the CEO of Midwest Financial, a Fortune 500 company and potentially Phoenix's largest client to date. "Our technical team reviewed your platform," the CEO said, leaning forward. "Frankly, it outperforms anything we've seen in the market. How did you achieve such precision in regional market assessments?" Jessica smiled. "We have exceptional talent on our development team." The meeting concluded with a handshake agreement to move forward, Phoenix Digital's first Fortune 500 client. As Jessica left the Midwest Financial headquarters, her phone rang. It was a representative from the Singapore Financial Authority, inviting her to discuss potential expansion into Asian markets. The opportunity was tremendous, exactly the type of global growth Phoenix needed. But it would require extensive travel, weeks away from Alex and Emma during a crucial developmental period. That evening, Jessica discussed the dilemma with Rajiv over dinner at her apartment, the twins already asleep. Singapore could open doors throughout Asia, she said, twirling pasta on her fork without eating it. The potential market is enormous. But, Rajiv prompted, knowing her well enough to hear the hesitation. But the twins would be essentially without a parent for weeks at a time. They're entering a new academic program, navigating complex social dynamics as prodigies among typical children. They need stability, presence. Rajiv set down his glass. You built Phoenix to give them a better life, Jessica. Don't forget to be present in that life. His words struck her deeply. Jessica thought of Marcus, who had chosen career advancement over family without hesitation. Was she now facing the same choice, just in a different form? Across the city that same evening, in a considerably smaller luxury apartment, Marcus Blackwood stood before his superior at Goldman Sachs, facing the consequences of his failed strategy in emerging markets. The Taiwan position lost $28 million, Blackwood, his boss stated flatly. The board is questioning your judgment. The indicators supported the investment, Marcus argued. No one could have predicted the regulatory shift. Henderson predicted it, came the cold reply. As did Merrill. This is your third significant miscalculation this year. Your father's influence can only shield you for so long. The following weekend, Jessica took the twins to visit the Bronx neighborhood where they had lived until age 5. The building looked smaller than she remembered, the street narrower, the whole area simultaneously foreign and intimately familiar. We lived here? Emma asked, staring at the rundown structure with its peeling paint and broken front step. Right there, Jessica pointed to a second-floor window. One room for the 3 of us. That's where I wrote the first version of Phoenix's core algorithm, with you both sleeping in a second-hand crib beside me. Alex studied the building with the same analytical gaze he applied to mathematical problems. It's so small. It was all we could afford then, Jessica explained. I want you both to understand where we started, to always remember the journey. As they walked the neighborhood, Emma's question came unexpectedly. Mama, are we rich now? Jessica considered how to answer truthfully without creating a distorted sense of privilege. We have resources many people don't. That means we have responsibility to use them wisely and compassionately. That philosophy guided Jessica as Phoenix Digital continued its meteoric rise. When her executive team pushed for aggressive expansion and maximized profit margins, Jessica insisted on sustainable growth and ethical practices. She established the Phoenix Foundation, focusing specifically on supporting single mothers pursuing entrepreneurship. The grant program should include childcare subsidies, she instructed her foundation director. The greatest barrier for these women isn't lack of ideas or drive. It's the practical logistics of raising children while building a business. As Phoenix approached its 7th anniversary, Jessica found herself at a luxury jewelry store on 5th Avenue. For years, she had reinvested nearly every dollar of profit back into the company or saved for the twins' future. Now, for the first time, she was purchasing something purely for herself. A diamond necklace that cost more than most people's annual salaries. It's exquisite on you, the saleswoman commented as Jessica fastened the clasp. Jessica studied her reflection, seeing not just the successful CEO she had become, but also the desperate pregnant woman who once couldn't afford rent. The necklace wasn't merely decorative, it was symbolic, a reminder that she had survived the days when her bank account held just $237. I'll take it, she said decisively. At Phoenix Digital's 7th anniversary celebration, Jessica cut the ribbon on their new corporate headquarters, a 20-story building in downtown Manhattan with the company's Golden Phoenix emblem illuminated atop the structure. Standing before employees, clients, and press, Jessica felt a profound sense of validation. 7 years ago, Phoenix Digital began with a simple premise. Financial systems should serve human potential, not limit it, she declared. Today, we've proven that vision doesn't just work, it thrives. As cameras flashed and applause filled the atrium, Jessica caught sight of Alex and Emma standing with Rajiv, their faces beaming with pride. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every sleepless night, every rejection had led to this triumph. While Jessica cut the ribbon on Phoenix Digital's new headquarters, she couldn't know that in just 4 years, she would stand in the same room as Marcus Blackwood for the first time since his abandonment, with her genius twin children at her side and a company valued at nearly $5 billion. The ribbon-cutting ceremony marked more than just a new building. It symbolized Phoenix Digital's ascent from desperate idea to dominant force. 4 years later, at age 14, the twins had undergone an equally remarkable transformation. Jessica watched with quiet pride as Emma explained quantum computing principles to a stunned MIT professor, her confident gestures and articulate explanations belying her youth. The traditional approach fundamentally misunderstands how quantum entanglement can be leveraged for financial modeling, Emma said, her slender fingers dancing across the holographic display in the Phoenix Digital private conference room. Our simulations demonstrate a 43% improvement in predictive accuracy. Beside her, Alex nodded, his serious expression so reminiscent of Marcus that it occasionally caught Jessica off guard. The paper we're publishing next month details the mathematical proofs, he added, adjusting his glasses with the same precise movement he'd had since childhood. The professor, a renowned expert in computational finance, looked from the twins to Jessica with undisguised amazement. Ms. Reynolds, your children are extraordinary. Many of my doctoral candidates couldn't conceptualize what they've just explained. Jessica smiled, the compliment warming her despite its familiarity. The twins' acceptance into MIT's special program for exceptionally gifted youth had surprised no one who knew them. At 14, they attended university courses 3 days a week while continuing accelerated studies at their private academy. They've always seen patterns where others see chaos, she replied simply. After the meeting, Jessica checked her watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that had replaced the drugstore digital timepiece she'd worn during Phoenix's early years. We need to head back to the office. The presentation at the plaza is in 3 hours, and we still need to review the final slides. In the back of the company Tesla, Emma opened her laptop, lines of code reflecting in her glasses. I want to run one more diagnostic on the demonstration model. The distributed ledger section feels clunky. It's perfectly optimized, Alex countered, pulling out his own computer. But the visualization could be more intuitive for the banking executives. They're not all technically proficient. Jessica observed their exchange with a mixture of awe and amusement. From infancy, the twins had displayed remarkable intellect, but the past year had seen their capabilities blossom exponentially. They weren't just smart kids anymore. They were emerging thought leaders whose papers were being published in peer-reviewed journals. I can't believe they let us present at the National Financial Technology Conference, Emma said, glancing up from her screen. Do you think they know our age? They know, Jessica assured her. Your reputation precedes you. At Phoenix headquarters, the executive floor buzzed with energy. Jessica's assistant intercepted them as they exited the elevator. Senator Matthews confirmed his attendance, and the final attendance list just arrived. 317 confirmed guests, including CEOs from every major bank. Including Goldman Sachs? Jessica asked casually, accepting the tablet with the guest list. Yes, they're sending their entire executive leadership team. Jessica nodded, betraying no emotion though her heart quickened slightly. She hadn't personally crossed paths with Marcus in 14 years, but she knew from industry intelligence that his career hadn't fulfilled its early promise. After several strategic missteps, he'd been sidelined to a respectable but unremarkable position, a far cry from the corporate domination he'd sacrificed his personal life to pursue. Not that it mattered anymore. The empire she'd built had long since eclipsed any validation she might have once craved from him. In her private office, Jessica reviewed the presentation while the twins refined their sections. The algorithm they were unveiling today represented a quantum leap in financial technology, a system that could render traditional risk assessment models obsolete virtually overnight. "Mom," Alex called from the sitting area where he and Emma had spread their materials across a glass table. "What should we emphasize in the technical breakdown? The computational efficiency or the accuracy improvements?" "Both," Jessica replied. "The banks care about accuracy, but the regulators care about transparency and efficiency. We need to address all stakeholders." Emma looked up from her tablet. "Should we mention that we initially developed this as a school project?" Jessica smiled. "Perhaps not in those exact words. Let's emphasize that this represents next-generation thinking from Phoenix's research division." The truth was more remarkable. The twins had indeed conceived the core algorithm for a science competition, but had then spent months refining it with Phoenix's development team. Their natural understanding of both mathematics and human behavior had resulted in a breakthrough that Jessica's senior engineers admitted they might never have achieved on their own. 3 hours later, Jessica stood in the luxurious suite at the Plaza Hotel, changing into the Armani dress she'd selected for the keynote address. Through the window, Central Park stretched in verdant splendor, a view that cost $5,000 per night. The opulence was a far cry from the women's shelter where she'd spent her first weeks after Marcus's abandonment. As she fastened her diamond necklace, the one she'd bought herself when Phoenix reached its first billion in valuation, Jessica caught her reflection in the mirror. At 40, she looked not just successful, but powerful. The frightened, abandoned pregnant woman had been replaced by someone who commanded rooms, whose opinions shaped industries, whose decisions affected thousands of livelihoods. A knock at the door preceded Emma's entrance. "The final metrics just came in," she announced, holding her iPad. "The algorithm outperformed even our projections in the stress test scenarios." Jessica took the tablet, scanning the impressive results. "This will change everything, Emma. You and Alex have created something revolutionary." Emma beamed at the praise, but quickly returned to business. "Alex is already downstairs checking the presentation system. We should join him soon." Jessica nodded, making a final adjustment to her appearance. "Are you ready to make history again?" "Always," Emma replied with the confident smile that reminded Jessica so much of herself. Downstairs, the plaza's grand ballroom had been transformed into a sleek, modern venue befitting the cutting-edge technology being unveiled. The Phoenix digital logo, a golden phoenix rising from stylized blue flames, dominated the stage backdrop. Over 300 of the financial world's most influential figures mingled before rows of elegant chairs. Alex stood by the presentation console, methodically testing each element of their demonstration. At 14, he already carried himself with the poise of a seasoned executive, his tailored suit and composed demeanor belying his youth. "Everything's functioning perfectly," he reported as Jessica and Emma approached. "The neural network visualization is particularly impressive on this display system." Jessica squeezed his shoulder affectionately. "You've thought of everything, as usual." As the audience began taking their seats, Jessica scanned the crowd, recognizing the faces of people who had once rejected her funding applications, denied her loans, questioned her capability. Now they came as supplicants, eager for access to Phoenix's innovations. She hadn't actively looked for Marcus, but her eyes found him nonetheless, seated 7 rows back, on the aisle. 14 years had added silver to his temples and lines around his eyes, but his bearing remained unmistakable. He was speaking to a colleague, unaware of her gaze. Something twisted in Jessica's chest, not longing or regret, but a strange, detached curiosity. This man, who had once been the center of her world, now occupied no space in her life beyond a biological connection to her children. The revelation wasn't painful, it was liberating. "Ms. Reynolds?" The event coordinator appeared at her elbow. "We're ready to begin whenever you are." Jessica nodded, turning away from the past and toward her future. "Let's get started." The lights dimmed as Jessica took the stage, her presence commanding immediate attention. The crowd fell silent, 300 influential individuals focused entirely on her words. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and assured. "For decades, the financial industry has operated on risk assessment models that systematically exclude viable participants while failing to accurately predict actual risks. Today, Phoenix Digital is unveiling a system that will fundamentally transform how we understand, evaluate, and mitigate financial risk." From his seat, Marcus Blackwood stared at the woman on stage, a strange dissonance between the Jessica he remembered and this commanding presence. When she introduced the technical architects of the new system, calling Alex and Emma Reynolds to join her, his polite attention transformed into stunned recognition. The teenagers who confidently took the stage bore unmistakable resemblances to him. Alex with his height and facial structure, Emma with the characteristic Blackwood smile and poised confidence. They were poised, articulate, and demonstrating technical knowledge that left the audience murmuring in impressed surprise. The traditional model fails to account for temporal variations in consumer behavior, Alex explained, displaying complex mathematical formulas that few in the audience fully comprehended. "By implementing a quantum-inspired decision matrix," Emma continued seamlessly, "we've achieved predictive accuracy improvements of 78% in high-volatility scenarios." Marcus sat frozen, the champagne flute in his hand forgotten as 14 years of choices and consequences materialized before him in the form of two brilliant young strangers who carried his DNA. After the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Jessica mingled with attendees, fielding questions and accepting congratulations. The twins moved through the crowd with surprising ease, engaging confidently with bank executives and government officials who treated them with the respect normally reserved for established experts. "The senator wants to discuss implementation for the banking committee," Emma reported, appearing at Jessica's side during a rare moment between conversations. "I'll be right there," Jessica promised. As Emma departed, Jessica felt a prickling awareness. Marcus was approaching, his expression a complex mixture of emotions she had no interest in deciphering. Before he could reach her, Alex intercepted her with a technical question from one of the bank CTOs. By the time she finished that conversation, Marcus had been pulled into a discussion with other Goldman executives. Later that evening, as they returned to their Tribeca penthouse, Alex broke the contemplative silence in the car. "There was a man watching us very intently during the presentation. He seemed affected by our appearance." Jessica met his perceptive gaze in the dim light. "You noticed that, did you?" "It would be difficult not to," Emma chimed in. "He dropped his champagne glass when you introduced us. The sound was quite disruptive." Jessica wasn't surprised by their observation. The twins missed nothing, their awareness extending far beyond academics to subtle human dynamics. "Was that him?" Alex asked directly. "Our biological father?" Jessica took a measured breath. "Yes." "Interesting," Emma murmured, exchanging a glance with her brother. "I calculated a 67% probability based on facial structure similarities but needed confirmation." "Are you okay, Mom?" Alex asked, reaching for her hand. Jessica smiled, genuinely touched by their concern. "Perfectly fine. Seeing him means nothing to me now." "But it might eventually mean something to us," Emma said thoughtfully. "We've researched him, you know. His career trajectory has been rather disappointing compared to his early potential." Jessica wasn't surprised the twins had investigated their biological father. Their curiosity was boundless, their research skills exceptional. "Whatever relationship you might or might not want with him someday would be your choice to make. I've never wanted to influence that decision." "You've been more than enough," Alex stated firmly. As they reached home, Jessica couldn't help reflecting on the strange symmetry of the evening. 14 years ago, Marcus had told her she would never be enough for the world he intended to conquer. Now she had transformed global finance while he remained a mid-level executive whose greatest accomplishments might well be the children he had refused to acknowledge. While Jessica prepared for bed that night, she couldn't know that in less than 24 hours, she would stand face-to-face with Marcus Blackwood in a confrontation that would change forever the power dynamic between them. This time, with all of Wall Street as witness, Jessica couldn't help reflecting on the strange symmetry of the evening as she prepared for bed. 14 years ago, Marcus had deemed her insufficient for his world. Now she had transformed global finance while he remained a mid-level executive whose greatest accomplishments might well be the children he had refused to acknowledge. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the plaza's presidential suite as Jessica reviewed her notes one final time. In a few hours, she would present Phoenix Digital's revolutionary algorithm to the most influential figures in global finance. The Dior dress hanging on the closet door, midnight blue with subtle silver threading, represented more than just elegant attire. It was armor for the battlefield of high finance where she had fought and won against overwhelming odds. "The car will arrive in 40 minutes, her assistant reminded her through the suite's communication system. "Senator Matthews has requested a brief meeting before your keynote." In the adjacent room, Emma sat cross-legged on the bed, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard, making last-minute adjustments to their presentation. The code reflected in her glasses as she frowned in concentration. "This distributed ledger visualization still isn't intuitive enough for banking executives," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "They'll miss the significance if they can't grasp the underlying architecture." "They don't need to understand every line of code," Jessica reminded her, adjusting her earrings, platinum and sapphire, a gift she'd bought herself when Phoenix secured its 100th banking client. "They just need to see the results." In the second bedroom, Alex methodically knotted his tie, his movements precise and deliberate. At 14, he carried himself with the gravitas of someone twice his age, his analytical mind constantly processing, calculating, optimizing. "I've reviewed the attendee list," he said as Jessica entered. 63% of the Fortune 500 financial sector will be represented. This is our optimal opportunity to establish the new standard. Jessica smiled at his assessment. Where other teenagers might feel nervous about presenting to hundreds of powerful executives, Alex saw only variables and probabilities. "Your tie is perfect," she assured him, straightening it unnecessarily, a maternal gesture more for her benefit than his. Across town in his Upper East Side apartment, Marcus Blackwood adjusted his own tie with considerably less confidence. At 42, he still cut an impressive figure, his tailored suit concealing the slight softening around his middle, his carefully maintained haircut disguising the receding hairline. But the mirror reflected the signs of strain, the lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the subtle slump of shoulders that once carried success effortlessly. "The Henderson portfolio is still underperforming," his colleague informed him over the phone as Marcus gathered his materials for the conference. "The board is asking questions again." "I'll handle it next week," Marcus replied, his tone projecting a confidence he no longer felt. "Today's focus is the Financial Technology Conference. Every major player will be there." He didn't mention that his attendance was more obligation than opportunity. Once, Marcus Blackwood had been Goldman Sachs's golden boy, destined for the C-suite. Now, after a series of miscalculations in Asian markets and a failed expansion strategy in Europe, he was just another director fighting to maintain relevance. The limousine that delivered Jessica and the twins to the Plaza Hotel attracted admiring glances from pedestrians. The Phoenix Digital logo, subtle but unmistakable on the vehicle's door, had become as recognizable in financial circles as Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan. In the hotel lobby, they were immediately approached by the event coordinator, a woman in her 30s who radiated nervous energy. "Ms. Reynolds, we've reserved the Emerald Room for your final preparations," she explained, leading them through the opulent space. "Your technical team has already verified the presentation systems. Everything is perfect." The Emerald Room, a luxurious private lounge adjacent to the Grand Ballroom, had been transformed into a temporary command center for Phoenix Digital. Technicians made final adjustments to displays while Jessica's assistant managed a stream of messages from investors, clients, and media requesting moments of her time. "Senator Matthews is waiting in the side parlor," the assistant informed her. "Shall I bring him in?" Jessica nodded, smoothing her dress. The senator's banking committee was considering legislation that would reshape financial regulations, legislation that could either enhance or hinder Phoenix's expansion plans. When Marcus arrived at the conference 30 minutes later, he entered through the main doors, joining the general flow of attendees. No special access, no VIP treatment. He nodded to acquaintances, exchanged pleasantries with competitors, maintained the carefully constructed facade of success that had become second nature. Blackwood, called a former classmate from Wharton, now CEO of a regional bank, heard about the Taiwan situation. Tough break. Marcus forced a smile. Temporary setback. We're repositioning for Q3. The conversations followed a predictable pattern, superficial inquiries masking genuine assessment, the constant jockeying for position that defined Wall Street relationships. Marcus navigated them on autopilot, his mind partially occupied with his precarious standing at Goldman. "Quite a lineup of speakers today," commented a colleague scanning the program. "Jessica Reynolds giving the keynote. Her company's valuation is approaching $5 billion now." "Reynolds?" Marcus repeated, the name triggering a long-buried memory. "From Phoenix Digital?" "The very same. Incredible story. Built it from nothing after leaving Monarch Financial under mysterious circumstances. Word is she's unveiling something revolutionary today." Marcus nodded, the name echoing uncomfortably. He'd heard of Phoenix Digital, of course. Everyone in finance had. But he hadn't connected its founder to the woman he'd once known. Jessica was a common enough name, and he'd made a point of never looking back. The Grand Ballroom filled quickly, hundreds of financial leaders taking their seats beneath crystal chandeliers. Marcus found his place 7 rows back on the aisle, close enough to be considered present, not close enough to suggest particular interest. "They say Reynolds has genius twins who work on their algorithms," mentioned the woman beside him, a hedge fund manager from Chicago. "Literal prodigies attending MIT at 14. Can you imagine?" An uncomfortable prickling sensation traveled up Marcus's spine. Something about the detail triggered alarm bells, but before he could process why, the lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies took the stage, welcoming the assembled financial elite to the annual conference. "And now, it is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker." The announcer's voice resonated through the perfect acoustics. "The founder and CEO of Phoenix Digital, a woman whose innovations have reshaped our understanding of financial systems, Jessica Reynolds." Marcus's breath caught as Jessica emerged from the wings. Even from a distance, he recognized her immediately. Her posture, her graceful movement, the tilt of her head as she surveyed the room. But this Jessica bore little resemblance to the woman he remembered. She radiated confidence and power, her designer dress and carefully styled hair marking her as someone who belonged in the upper echelons of society. "Good evening," Jessica began, her voice steady and commanding. "For decades, the financial industry has operated on risk assessment models that systematically exclude viable participants while failing to accurately predict actual risks." Marcus listened with growing discomfort, memories flooding back unbidden. The apartment in Brooklyn, the pregnancy test, the cruel words he'd spoken, the ring arcing through the winter air as he threw it out the window. Today, Phoenix Digital is unveiling a system that will fundamentally transform how we understand, evaluate, and mitigate financial risk, Jessica continued, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, with his presence. Marcus shifted in his seat, suddenly finding it difficult to breathe normally. This poised, powerful woman had once knelt on the floor of their apartment, begging him not to leave her alone and pregnant. To demonstrate how our new algorithm functions in practice, I'd like to introduce the technical architects behind this innovation. Jessica smiled, looking off stage. Alex and Emma Reynolds, please join me. The crystal champagne flute slipped from Marcus's suddenly numb fingers as two teenagers walked confidently onto the stage. The sound of shattering glass drew irritated glances from nearby attendees, but Marcus couldn't tear his eyes from the stage. The boy, tall, lean, with serious dark eyes and a deliberate manner, was unmistakably his son. The same jawline, the same analytical gaze that Marcus saw in the mirror each morning. The girl stood with natural poise, her smile, his mother's smile, the distinctive Blackwood expression, flashing briefly as she took her position at the presentation console. "Impossible," Marcus whispered, gripping the armrest of his chair as the floor seemed to tilt beneath him. Together the twins began explaining complex technological concepts with remarkable clarity, alternating seamlessly as they demonstrated a system that rendered traditional financial models obsolete. They mentioned their studies at MIT, their published research, their integration of quantum computing principles into financial algorithms. Throughout their presentation, Jessica stood slightly to the side, her expression one of unmistakable pride. Once, just once, her eyes scanned the audience and paused momentarily on Marcus. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by something unreadable before she returned her attention to her children. Their children. Marcus sat paralyzed, unable to process the magnitude of what he was witnessing. The brilliant young people commanding the attention of the financial world's elite were his flesh and blood, children he had rejected before they were even born, declaring them obstacles to his ambition. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Marcus remained seated while others rose in standing ovation. His mind raced through calculations. 14 years since he'd last seen Jessica, which aligned perfectly with the twins' age. There was no question. These were his children, and they had no idea who he was. While the twins shone on stage with the confidence of those born to lead, no one could predict that in the next few minutes, the confrontation between Jessica and Marcus would trigger an earthquake in Wall Street's power structures, beginning with the carefully calculated words she would direct at the man who had once believed she wasn't worth the sacrifice. As the twins concluded their presentation to thunderous applause, Jessica returned to center stage, her midnight blue Dior dress catching the light as she moved with practiced grace. The confidence in her posture was undeniable, a stark contrast to the broken woman who had once huddled in a Bronx apartment, calculating if she could afford prenatal vitamins or rent. "Thank you, Alex and Emma," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the ballroom's perfect acoustics. "What you've just witnessed represents not only the future of financial technology, but a fundamental shift in how we understand human potential." Her eyes swept the audience, deliberately pausing on Marcus's stunned face for just a moment before continuing. "Sometimes the people who should believe in us are the first to abandon us. But as I've learned, being abandoned by success can be the first step toward being triumphant through destiny." The words landed like precision-guided missiles. To the hundreds of executives present, they sounded like inspirational rhetoric. To Marcus, they were an unmistakable reference to his cruelest declarations 14 years ago. As Jessica concluded her remarks, financial leaders surged forward, eager to secure meetings, partnerships, and implementation timelines. The twins were immediately surrounded by admirers, university professors, tech entrepreneurs, and banking executives all vying for a moment with the young prodigies. Marcus remained frozen in his seat, fragments of champagne glass still scattered at his feet. The words he had spoken all those years ago echoed in his mind. "You'll never be enough for the world I intend to conquer." The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. Jessica had conquered that world while he had merely survived in it. Finally, gathering what remained of his composure, Marcus rose and made his way toward the stage. Security personnel gave His Goldman Sachs credentials still carried some weight, even if his personal stock had fallen. Jessica was engaged in conversation with the CEO of JP Morgan when she noticed Marcus approaching. Something imperceptible shifted in her expression. Not fear, not anger, but a cool assessment. She said something to the banking executive who nodded and stepped away. "Jessica," Marcus began, his voice rougher than intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Jessica, Marcus," she acknowledged with professional courtesy, as though greeting a minor business acquaintance at an industry function. "I didn't know." He gestured vaguely toward where the twins stood across the room, still deep in technical discussions with admirers. They're mine?" Jessica's expression hardened slightly. "Biologically?" "Yes." Her voice dropped, ensuring only he could hear the next words. "Your children in any other sense?" "Absolutely not." Before Marcus could respond, Emma approached, tablet in hand, her expression curious as she regarded the stranger speaking with her mother. "Mom, Senator Matthews wants to discuss implementation on the banking committee," she said, her articulate speech reflecting none of the adolescent awkwardness typical of 14-year-olds. "I'll be there in a moment, sweetie," Jessica replied, her tone warming instantly. Emma turned her attention to Marcus, studying him with analytical precision. "You're the man who dropped the champagne glass during our presentation. Are you all right? You seemed quite shaken." Marcus stared at his daughter, this brilliant, poised young woman who shared his DNA but nothing of his life. I'm fine. Just impressed with your work. You and your brother are extraordinary." "Thank you," Emma replied with polite detachment. The computational models were challenging to optimize, but the practical applications justified the effort. "Dad, who is this man?" Alex asked, approaching the group and studying Marcus with the same penetrating gaze that Marcus himself used in boardroom negotiations. The word "dad" struck Marcus like a physical blow. Rajiv Mehta, the man he'd noticed standing protectively near the twins throughout the event, was clearly the father figure in their lives. "This is Marcus Blackwood, from Goldman Sachs," Jessica answered smoothly, her voice controlled. "An old acquaintance." "Blackwood?" Alex repeated, his sharp mind immediately connecting dots as he observed the unmistakable similarities between himself and the stranger. The jawline, the eyes, the way they both stood with weight slightly shifted to the right. "Interesting." "Mr. Blackwood was just leaving," Jessica stated, her tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Actually," Marcus persisted, desperate to extend the moment, "I was hoping to discuss potential opportunities, strategic partnerships between our companies." Jessica laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that drew curious glances from nearby attendees. "Marcus, your company uses systems that my children just proved obsolete. What partnership exactly do you imagine?" Before Marcus could formulate a response, Alex stepped forward, his expression shifting from curiosity to recognition as understanding dawned. "You're him, aren't you?" he asked quietly. "The man who abandoned us. The man who told our mother she wasn't worth the sacrifice." The directness of the question created a pocket of silence amid the bustling reception. Several nearby executives paused their conversations, suddenly attentive to the drama unfolding. Marcus felt the color drain from his face. He had imagined many scenarios over the years, chance encounters with Jessica where he might offer explanations or justifications. He had never imagined facing the consequences of his actions in the form of two brilliant teenagers who saw through him instantly. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "The worst mistake of my life." Emma's expression remained clinically detached as she processed this information. "A mistake?" she repeated, her tone surprisingly calm. "Is that how you classify the abandonment of a woman pregnant with twins? A simple error?" Marcus flinched at the precision of her words. There was no teenage drama, no emotional outburst, just a devastating logical assessment of his actions. Alex placed a protective hand on his sister's shoulder. Fascinating how certain people only recognize errors when confronted with consequences they couldn't predict. Jessica observed her children with unmistakable pride. They didn't need her protection. They had developed their own strength, their own wisdom. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private," Marcus suggested, acutely aware of the interested onlookers and smartphones discreetly capturing the interaction. "There's nothing that needs to be discussed privately," Jessica replied firmly. "You made your decision 15 years ago, publicly, when you fired me for being pregnant and evicted me from our apartment in the middle of winter. Transparency seems appropriate now." A nearby executive coughed uncomfortably. "Jessica, I didn't realize you had history with Blackwood." "History?" Jessica smiled thinly. "Just a brief, unpleasant chapter I fortunately finished writing long ago." The implications of Jessica's words spread through the gathering like ripples in still water. Marcus Blackwood, the respected Goldman Sachs director, had abandoned Jessica Reynolds when she was pregnant with his children, the same genius twins who had just presented revolutionary technology. "Jessica, please," Marcus implored, his carefully constructed professional persona crumbling. "Can we at least talk? I'd like to know my children." "Your children?" Alex interrupted, his voice level but firm. "Biologically, we share DNA, but a father is someone who is present, who teaches, who supports. Our mother has been all of that for us. You're just a stranger with physical characteristics similar to ours." Emma studied Marcus with clinical detachment. "You know, I always wondered what it would be like to meet you. I imagined I would feel anger, curiosity, perhaps even an inexplicable connection. But now, looking at you, I feel absolutely nothing." Her words struck Marcus with devastating precision. He had imagined this moment so differently, perhaps tears, recriminations, but eventually an opening for redemption. "You don't understand," he tried again. "I was young, too ambitious. I made a terrible mistake, but I can make up for it. I can be part of your lives now." Jessica stepped forward, her presence suddenly dominating. "Part of our lives now? Now that they're recognized prodigies? Now that I'm a billionaire? How convenient, Marcus." The murmurs around them grew louder. Rebecca Chen, editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, approached discreetly. "Jessica, it seems we have an interesting story developing here. Would you like to give your version officially?" Marcus paled. A story like this would destroy what remained of his reputation. "Actually, Rebecca," Jessica smiled warmly, "I'd prefer to focus on the future. Phoenix just announced technology that will revolutionize risk assessments. That's the story deserving attention." The reporter looked disappointed but nodded respectfully. "Jessica," Marcus whispered when the journalist moved away, "thank you for not—" "Don't confuse mercy with indifference, Marcus," she interrupted coldly. "I didn't expose you because your relevance in our lives is so minuscule it doesn't merit mention." At that moment, Rajiv Mehta approached with two Japanese executives. "Jessica, Alex, Emma, the Mitsubishi representatives are eager to discuss implementation across Asian markets." "Excuse us," Jessica said to Marcus with the polite dismissal one might offer a waiter or minor functionary. Marcus watched as she walked away with the twins, his children, surrounded by admirers and potential partners, their family forming an impenetrable nucleus of complicity and success. The next morning, he awoke to news that Phoenix Digital had secured exclusive contracts with 5 of the world's 10 largest banks. The photograph of Jessica with the twins graced the front page of the Financial Times under the headline, "The Family Redefining Wall Street." 3 days later, Marcus received an envelope at his office. Inside was a simple card with the Phoenix logo and a handwritten note. "Marcus, the twins suggested I clarify our position. They have no desire for any relationship with you. I respect their decision as I always have. Regarding business opportunities, Goldman will receive our standard proposal without special treatment, positive or negative. Jessica Reynolds, CEO, Phoenix Digital." Accompanying the card was a check made out to the New York Foundation for Abandoned Children in the amount of $237, the exact sum Jessica had in her account when he abandoned her, signed by Alex and Emma Reynolds with a note, "So that no one else has to build an empire just to prove their worth." Marcus stared at the check in his hands, the crisp paper trembling slightly between his fingers. $237, the exact amount Jessica had when he'd abandoned her. The precision of the gesture was unmistakable, a calculated reminder rather than a coincidence, but it was the note that truly gutted him. So that no one else has to build an empire just to prove their worth. He let the envelope drop to his desk, suddenly feeling the weight of 14 years of choices crystallized in this single devastating message. Outside his office window, the Manhattan skyline stretched across the horizon, the distinctive Phoenix Digital headquarters, a gleaming tower shaped like a rising flame, dominating the view. It seemed to taunt him daily with its visibility, a monument to what he had discarded. The following morning, financial headlines across the globe announced Phoenix Digital's unprecedented sweep of contracts with banking giants. Reynolds' algorithm revolutionizes risk assessment, proclaimed the Wall Street Journal. Global financial institutions adopt Phoenix standards, declared the Financial Times. Each article featured photographs of Jessica and the twins, their triumphant smiles and unmistakable family resemblance haunting Marcus's breakfast table. At Phoenix headquarters, Jessica reviewed the morning's press coverage with her executive team, maintaining professional composure despite the personal victory underlying their business success. "The implementation timeline for First National Bank needs to be accelerated," she instructed her operations director. "They want to announce integration before their quarterly earnings call." As the meeting concluded, Rajiv lingered behind, his expression thoughtful. "How are you really doing, Jessica, after the confrontation with Marcus?" Jessica's practiced smile faltered momentarily. "Honestly? Better than I expected. Seeing him was like encountering a stranger who once occupied significant space in my life but now feels irrelevant." "And the twins?" "Processing in their own ways," Jessica replied. "Emma's been researching psychological studies on absent fathers. Alex has thrown himself into optimizing the algorithm further, both logical responses, given their personalities." That evening, Jessica returned to the penthouse to find Emma curled on the window seat overlooking the city, tablet in hand but clearly not focused on its contents. The setting sun cast golden light across her thoughtful features that, Jessica had to admit, contained echoes of Marcus. "Heavy thoughts?" Jessica asked, joining her daughter. Emma looked up, her expression analytically detached, but her eyes revealing deeper emotions. "I've been considering the statistical improbability of our success." "Meaning?" "If he hadn't abandoned us," Emma clarified, "the probability of Phoenix Digital existing is approximately 0%. You would have remained at Monarch Financial, possibly advancing but within traditional structures. We might have been privileged but ordinary children." Jessica considered this perspective, struck by its insight. "That's remarkably perceptive. His rejection created necessary conditions for extraordinary outcomes," Emma continued. "It's almost mathematically elegant, how his cruelest act catalyzed our greatest achievements." Alex emerged from his room, having overheard the conversation. "That doesn't excuse what he did," he stated firmly, joining them at the window. "Positive outcomes don't retroactively justify moral failures." "Of course not," Emma agreed. "I'm merely observing the paradox." Jessica studied her children with profound admiration. At 14, they processed complex emotional situations with clarity most adults never achieved. "We've been talking," Alex said, exchanging a glance with his sister. "About him, about the situation." "And?" Jessica prompted gently. "We think we should send a final message," Emma explained, "formally closing this chapter rather than leaving it ambiguous." Jessica nodded slowly. "If that's what you feel is necessary, I support your decision." "It's not for him," Alex clarified, his expression serious beyond his years. It's for us. For closure. The following day, Phoenix Digital's stock jumped 17% as major financial institutions worldwide announced adoption of their system. Analysts projected the company's valuation would exceed $7 billion by quarter's end. Jessica spent the morning in strategic meetings with her leadership team, reviewing implementation schedules and expansion plans. During a rare quiet moment in her office, she opened her personal email to find a message from the twins, a draft of the letter they proposed sending to Marcus. Its measured tone and clear boundaries reflected their remarkable emotional intelligence. "This is perfectly appropriate," she confirmed when they discussed it that evening. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Both nodded with the certainty that had characterized them since childhood. "He'll likely try to respond," Jessica warned, "to negotiate or justify." "We've considered that probability," Emma acknowledged. "Our decision remains unchanged." 2 days later, Marcus stared at his computer screen where a new email from Phoenix Digital had arrived. Unlike the previous envelope, this wasn't a formal card, but a direct message signed by both Alex and Emma. "Mr. Blackwood," it began, the formal address immediately establishing distance. "Following our unexpected meeting, we felt it appropriate to clarify our position regarding potential future interactions. After careful consideration, we have decided against pursuing any form of relationship. This isn't a decision made in anger or resentment, but rather a logical assessment of what serves our best interests." Marcus read the message 3 times, each paragraph more devastating than the last in its calm rationality. There were no accusations, no emotional appeals, just a clear, final decision that left no room for negotiation. The message concluded, "We wish you well in your professional and personal endeavors, but we request that you respect our boundaries by not attempting further contact. We have everything we need in our lives, and our family is complete as it stands. Respectfully, Alexander and Emma Reynolds." His hand hovered over the reply button before dropping away. What could he possibly say? They had systematically closed every avenue for response, their logic as impenetrable as their algorithm. For the first time, Marcus truly comprehended the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just Jessica, but these extraordinary young people who carried his DNA but owed him nothing of their brilliance, their character, their remarkable humanity. That same afternoon, Jessica signed the final documents for Phoenix Digital's new Asian headquarters in Singapore. Ironically, the very position Marcus had abandoned her to pursue 14 years earlier. The corporate attorneys exchanged congratulatory handshakes as Jessica's vision expanded globally. "Your timing is impeccable," noted the lead counsel. "With European financial regulations shifting, establishing an Asian base now positions Phoenix perfectly for the next decade." Jessica smiled, remembering how Marcus had once declared her an obstacle to his international ambitions. Now she commanded a truly global enterprise while his career remained stalled in domestic operations. As Jessica left the law firm's offices, her phone chimed with a text from the twins. "Message sent. We feel good about our decision." "I'm proud of you both," she replied simply. That evening, Jessica hosted a small dinner at their penthouse for Phoenix's leadership team to celebrate the Singapore expansion. As glasses clinked and conversation flowed, she found herself on the terrace with Rajiv, the city lights spread before them like a constellation. 14 years, Rajiv mused, swirling his wine thoughtfully. "When I found you presenting with 2 babies in your arms, I never imagined we'd be standing here." "You did," Jessica corrected him with a warm smile. "You saw the potential when no one else did, not even me." "I saw determination," Rajiv clarified. "The rest you created through sheer force of will." Inside, the twins engaged the company's technical leaders in animated discussion about quantum applications for their next-generation algorithm. Their confidence and clarity commanded respect from executives 3 times their age. "Have you thought about what happens next?" Rajiv asked quietly. With Marcus? Jessica shook her head. There is no next. The twins have made their decision and I respect it completely. Marcus Blackwood exists on the periphery of our story, a footnote, not a chapter. The following week, Marcus watched from his office as Phoenix Digital's stock reached an all-time high. The trading floor buzzed with discussion of Jessica's latest innovation, a system that could potentially restructure global banking infrastructure. Blackwood, his supervisor called, interrupting his thoughts. The quarterly review meeting starts in 10 minutes. Bring the Henderson portfolio analysis. Marcus gathered his materials, acutely aware that his once promising career had plateaued. He would never reach the heights Jessica had achieved, heights he had once deemed impossible for her. As he walked to the conference room, he passed the lobby where Phoenix Digital's cover story in Forbes was displayed in the reception area's magazine collection. Jessica stood confidently between the twins, the headline proclaiming, "The Reynolds Revolution: How Three Brilliant Minds Are Reinventing Finance." In that moment, Marcus finally understood with crystal clarity. His abandonment of Jessica hadn't destroyed her. It had liberated her. At Phoenix headquarters, Jessica reviewed architectural plans for their expanded research facility, designed specifically to support the twins' increasing involvement in the company's innovation pipeline. At 14, they had already filed 7 patents under their names, with 12 more pending. "Mom," Emma said, entering Jessica's office with a tablet displaying their latest project, "we've identified a completely new application for the distributed verification protocol." Jessica examined their work, once again amazed by their intuitive grasp of concepts that challenged seasoned developers. This was her legacy, not just a financial empire, but these remarkable human beings who would continue innovating long after her. "Will you present this at the Geneva conference next month?" she asked. "If you think it's ready," Alex replied, his confidence tempered by respect for her judgment. That night, as Jessica prepared for bed, she caught herself smiling at her reflection, not with triumph or vindication, but with genuine contentment. The wound that Marcus had inflicted had not just healed, it had transformed into something precious and powerful. While Marcus diminished with time, she and the twins had expanded beyond all expectations. Their lives were rich with purpose, achievement, and most importantly, the unshakable bonds they had formed through adversity. 15 years after being abandoned with only $237 in her account, Jessica Reynolds had built not just a financial empire of nearly $5 billion, but something infinitely more valuable. A family where no one needed to prove their worth to be loved unconditionally. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.